Welcome back to the Boudoir. Happy Tuesday. I am your host, Ieasha Jones, and you're getting Ieasha with the bonnet on because we just had an election, okay? So there should be no shock as to why I look like this. Who's putting a wig on in times like this? Okay. And friendly reminder, this is merely a prop because I broke my microphone and, I'm a starving artist at the moment. So, yeah. This week's episode is particularly exciting because we have our first guest ever on the Boudoir, and it is my mutual, probably one of the most profound people I follow. Her name is Alice Mills Mai. She is a therapist who is currently working on her PhD. Make sure we send her some congratulations and some good luck for her as she is working towards her next step in education. But I wanted to bring on Alice today, the therapist, because we need to talk about cancel culture and dogpiling. And as I do, I'm a thinker, I'm a thought daughter. I like to think, I like to theorize, and I've noticed that cancel culture, this dogpiling culture, this picking a random victim of the week to do a massive witch hunt on, it's getting a little peculiar and strange for me, but we're gonna talk all about that in today's episode. Now, I would say ever since maybe 2014, 2016, that's when people on the internet started becoming more inflammatory. And so as a response to this, with a certain person getting elected and now re-elected, it's now become commonplace and okay to just be a terrible person out loud and just completely taint your digital footprint. In response to that, people started to call people out on the internet because we're like, listen, we can't just have people saying ignorant stuff online and just get away with it. That's not cool. Words, actions have consequences. So of course, when you're seeing people be completely belligerent and flagrant online, you're going to want to band together and call this person out. Thus, we have cancel culture. And while I would say it's definitely necessary to hold people accountable, especially online, because like I said, these things live on the internet forever. You can't just say something inflammatory about a group of people and just think you're gonna get away with it. People are going to have a response to that, and oftentimes that response is calling people out. Now, canceling typically means that you're not going to watch this person's videos anymore. You're not going to listen to their music. You're not going to watch their movies. You're not going to give this person any attention. So it's basically the online version of whoosh, putting them on the chopping block. That is the whole premise of cancel culture. You do something bad, you say something bad, you get the people telling you what you said was bad and how bad it was. We shun you out, we don't want your stuff, and we move on until the next person gets canceled. Now, in theory, you're like, yeah, if you say something bad, of course you need to be held accountable for that. You need to apologize for what you've said, especially when it was something really, really, really bad. But how far is too far when it comes to cancel culture? And now, over the years, on the internet, we've had terms like social justice warrior, snowflake, woke, which is now, it's cringe to say that word because it's been completely co-opted by shmemishish. I hope you can understand what I'm saying. As the years go on and we're learning more about what's right to say and what's not right to say, we've gotten away from a culture where in the 90s and the 2000s, people would just say anything. People would just use all of these slurs and they would oftentimes go unchecked because we as a culture didn't see anything wrong with it. And of course, as societies change and as cultures change, the threshold for what's right and wrong gets altered and adjusted as time goes forward, as it should. When you know better, you should do better. Now, with short form apps like TikTok, a lot of us are closer in ways that we've never been before. We are able to access so many different people's opinions, seeing a little peeks into their lives, seeing how other people live, hearing how other people think, and we really are living in special times. I'm somebody of the mindset, and especially on this podcast, I try not to look at everything as 1,000% bad, 1,000% good, black or white. I don't like to do that. I like to really dig deep and get into it in the nitty-gritty of why things are the way they are, how we've gotten here, where are we gonna go from here. I love that type of stuff. It gets me going. So I've noticed as we have, apps like TikTok, it's slowly gone from, the dances, the dance challenges, the silly goofy stuff, and now we're turning into hot take culture. Giving my opinions on every single thing that goes on the internet culture. Stitch culture. Stitching people's stitches of stitches culture. Everybody wants to have their hat in the ring. Everybody wants to get their piece out there, right? Now, I think in the beginning of this cancel culture thing, we really did have the right idea. The whole point was to make sure that we show people that we're living in new times and you can't just say anything you want because actions have consequences. That was the original premise of cancel culture. However, does anybody else think we're shifting into like dogpiling times? Does anybody think that we've kind of gotten away from what cancel culture was supposed to be and now it's getting a little, well, it's getting a little chaotic? Now, anytime somebody says something slightly off kilter or just a little away from what the popular thought is, that person gets dogpiled, y'all. I've seen it with my own two eyes. And I wasn't gonna bring this person up because they've gone through enough, but Shaheem on TikTok, on Twitter, I refuse to call it X because that person has gotten drug up and down through every corner of the internet, and they don't even be saying anything inflammatory, okay? I've noticed that if you are upset about something that most people are not upset about, they will antagonize you for that. They will call you sensitive. They will say you're wrong. And I'm going to bring up the most recent example that I've seen of this with Shaheem, with the whole Jenkins family situation. If you don't know what I'm talking about, good. You don't need to know. I'm gonna just give you some very, very, very basic background information. So there was this woman who was living in a one-bedroom apartment with her deadbeat and her 7 children. It doesn't matter. The whole point of the conversation was, should poor people have children, or is it irresponsible for them to have children? Of course, everybody's giving their thoughts and opinions on this situation. It's a very touchy subject. A lot of us have grown up in poverty and seen the effects, and personally have felt the effects of what it's like to grow up impoverished. Shaheem brought up a great point in saying just straight up, just plainly saying poor people should not have kids is eugenics. That's what they said. That was the point of their videos, and all of a sudden the entire internet just started dogpiling on them. Stitches and indirects and subtweets and calling them everything but a child of God, basically, because they said saying poor people shouldn't have kids is eugenics. Something that isn't inflammatory, right? Like, that's a pretty tame sentence. I don't think that's anything crazy. I don't think that's anything cancel worthy. You can disagree with it. You can argue that it doesn't matter if it's eugenics or not because it's irresponsible. You can, that's fair. You can give fair critiques of what the person said, but what you can't do is start dogpiling on people and start isolating them and publicly shaming them and calling them out of their name. And that's where we have kind of traveled to in the past few years, and it's getting bad. And you know what? I know it's getting bad because I'm starting to see people have this same sentiment of like, okay, where are we gonna go with this whole cancel culture thing? Like, what is the end goal with this? And you know what? I would argue, do people that get canceled even really get canceled? Like, think about all the artists that should be canceled, like the Chris Browns of the world. I'm sorry, people are still downloading his music for some reason. I don't know why, but they're doing it. So are they truly canceled? I question, what should cancel culture be reserved for? Should it be reserved for the terrible monsters who do things like the Harvey Weinsteins, the Bill Cosbys, the Jeffrey Epsteins? Is that what cancel culture is reserved for? Is it reserved for people who are just inflammatory and make crazy, wild statements? Is it for people that are overly opinionated and sometimes their opinions rub people the wrong way? Or is it for any little arbitrary thing that we find distasteful? That's what I wonder. Because if you ask me, I notice that we're starting to lose the plot, and it's starting to give McCarthyism, it's starting to give the Salem witch trials, and it's giving very much evangelicalism. We're gonna talk about that. We're gonna make all of these connections in this video with the help of my therapist friend Alice, who is going to give us a little bit of like the mental health perspective of why these things happen. First, I want to ask, what are we doing with this cancel culture? Okay, is this really about holding people accountable? Is this really about showing people the error of their ways? Or is this simply a moral purity test? Is this about how morally superior, how morally pure can you be? And I've noticed that this new iteration of cancel culture reminds me a lot of McCarthyism. In the 50s and 60s, there was this Red Scare going on, and everybody in America was running around like chickens with their heads cut off. Are they a communist? Is my neighbor a communist? Oh my God, is my garden gardener a communist? Is my milkman a communist? Everybody was just like losing their minds. And so what do you do when you're in a mass panic and in mass hysteria? You start pointing fingers at everybody else. You start looking at everybody sideways because you're trying to figure out who is in this, you know, scary communist group thing, right? Thus came McCarthyism. McCarthy was trying to figure out who was in on this. Is it these celebrities? Is it other politicians? Is it regular old commoners? They were gonna find out, okay? And it didn't matter what methods they had to take to find out. They were going to find out somehow, some way. Kind of like what we do with cancel culture. When we notice that somebody has done something less than savory, what do? We start looking at all their past tweets. We start looking at everything they've ever done and said, and we start scrutinizing it on a very, very, very high level. And we do this because we have to find more evidence to support that that person is problematic. I'm gonna do everything I can. I'm gonna look at old posts. I'm gonna see what posts they like. I'm gonna see what posts they reposted. I'm gonna go back 10 years in time and I'm gonna find that one tweet. They're gonna do it. If you want to find something, you're gonna find it. It also reminds me of the Salem witch trials when they were literally drowning people and being like, oh wait, they didn't survive, maybe they weren't a witch. Yeah, maybe that's why we probably shouldn't go on witch hunts like that, because duh. Same with like evangelicalism. This needs to be morally pure and you can never mess up. You can never stray from these set guidelines that, who set them? I don't know, but you can't stray from this set guidelines of rules. Don't you dare have any sort of independent thought. We're coming for you, okay? Sometimes people can be so obsessed with being good and they start going on a witch hunt to try to find people that don't align with their morals so that they can call them out for how problematic they are. And actually, before we really get into the episode, I just want to make it perfectly clear. Some of yous need to be canceled, okay? So this is not me saying everybody that's ever been a bigot, you know, has done some terror. I'm not saying that one bit, okay? Some of yous needed to be canceled. So don't use this video as your retribution and being like, no, I didn't know. Yeah, you did. You probably deserved it. Okay, so we're not talking about you. We're talking about, you know, sometimes you may just say something that you didn't fully think out or you didn't fully understand the consequences of what you said. It's not necessarily something jail worthy. We don't need to like stone you publicly. Maybe you just said something at the wrong time and everybody's just very heightened and so they're looking for a boogeyman to blame and that person just happens to be you, this iteration. That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about the people that need to be canceled. When you're so obsessed with appearing to be good and, you know, trying your hardest to be that morally pure person, you can get really strict and you start looking at yourself and making sure that you're not falling out of line. And because you have the pressure of the people to like be this morally good person, that can sometimes drive people to moral OCD. This idea of anytime anybody's like calling out a behavior, you're like freaking out, thinking about all of the things you've ever said, making sure that that wasn't in your past. That's a real thing. Like, I mean, why would you want to be on the receiving end of, you know, the next cancel hate train? I wouldn't. And now you could say, well, if you don't want to be canceled, maybe you should just act right. And I totally agree with that. You know, maybe you should just not be a bigot. If you don't want to be treated as one, you should just not do that. You should just be a good person, right? But what happens when the power of the canceling gets in the wrong hands? There's people that will join these mass cancelings and these mass digital guillotines and they'll just sit there and be spectators. But do you think that everybody that's participating in these cancel trains, do you think they're all morally pure? Because I would find it very hard to believe. In fact, I feel like a lot of people like to join in on these, you know, massive hate trains in order to make themselves and posture themselves as the good person. If we're all pointing at this guy, who's gonna look at me? My skeletons are gonna be clean because we're focusing on them. Do you think people cling to these online shaming sessions to evade their own skeletons being exposed? So that if they're seen on the right side of history, then maybe people won't look into them. Especially when other influencers will be like, yeah, guys, yeah, I knew that they were a bad person, but don't look at me. What do you think about that?
Yeah. The shaming that happens, right? And people pile on. I think what you said about people using this either as an escape or to avoid looking at themselves, right? Because if it's somebody else, let's say on the chopping block, for lack of a better word, nobody's going to look at you. Exactly. Nobody's going to think what you're doing or what you're saying. And it's easy to point the finger at the other person and be like, this is what you're doing wrong. This is how you're not doing this right. Versus us looking at ourselves and be like, ooh, I have some things as well.
Right.
if let's say the spotlight is shine on me, I have some things as well that maybe I don't want people to know that much about, or I don't know people to know, or for it to come to the limelight, right? And I also think even with that, we use shaming as a tool to manipulate and coerce people into a certain kind of behavior, into how they should behave. And I think that is also part of the culture that we are part of, right? Nothing happens in a vacuum. Everything that happens, it is at the micro level, but also at the macro level. When we look at the systems that we live in, shame is a very powerful tool. It invokes fear, that it gets people to act a certain way. They may not do it willingly, but you can coerce people to act a certain way if you're able to shame them. And if it's everybody doing it at the same time, you can get the person to behave in a certain way, or people can just focus on that person. So shame, I think there is a global way of how we do it. There is also the micro way of how we do it as well. And how I see it, sometimes when you see people shaming other people without, even with shame, there is no compassion or empathy. I'm often like, what are you hiding from? Like, what are you really hiding from? Or what is your own internal process for you to come at somebody in this way, or for you to come at somebody in that way? And I'm not saying we shouldn't hold people accountable. Right. We can really hold people accountable, but I think the way in which we do it on social media, we don't think about people's mental health. We don't think about their emotional health. We don't think about their well-being. We don't think about their families and all of these things that at the end of it, it's like, okay, today it was you, then the next week we'll be like, okay, it's not the next person. Let's go.
Right. And I asked this especially because I'll say for me, when I was younger, I definitely played into that, like, oh, this person's canceled, and like the spectacle of like watching it happen. But now I've been like lately observing, I'm like, okay, what is the actual end goal of this? Because I'm sure you've seen on TikTok, every day is somebody new that's getting dragged, and some of it is deserved. But at the same time, it's like, okay, what are we gonna do now? Like, so that's just something I was grappling with, and that's a very interesting thing to bring up.
Yeah, and right, you say it right, when you were young, because again, we don't have any examples of how we hold people accountable, or how we have conflict, like healthy conflict with people, or healthy arguments, or healthy disagreements. It's not modeled for us on a bigger scale. And in our homes, it's only a few people that know about conflict management skills. So it becomes difficult versus to say, hey, you are bad, right? Again, if we go back to our homes, how we raise children, when a child does something, sometimes like, you are a bad girl, you are a bad child, go sit somewhere. Right? So
but not saying what happened. Yeah.
Without saying what happened, like, hey, when you made this statement, sometimes we can approach it with curiosity. I want to get you. I want to understand what you mean by what you said. Or when you made the statement, this is how I had it. And maybe you as a white person making the statement, me as a black person, and in my experience, this is how I see it. Or this is how I see it coming across, right? Versus, and again, like you said, there are some people who willfully
right,
they bring themselves, like, it's like, okay, you are really asking for it at
exactly
this point, right?
But if everybody that participated in these cancelings would just take a second to first look in the mirror and make sure that they're not participating in these behaviors. But secondly, they need to ask what they actually want to come out of this. Like, what do you want the end result to be of this canceling? Do you want them to be shunned? Do you want them to lose their job? What do you actually want from this? Or do you want them to learn and grow from it? Do you want them to apologize? I truly think that this mob mentality thing can be extremely dangerous, not just for the person that's on the receiving end of this, but for the person that's participating in it. It can be dangerous to get your little hit of dopamine from making a hate campaign about somebody. Because yeah, maybe it feels good for you in the moment and you get to just scroll past and go on with your life, but for the person that's on the other receiving end of that, where does that leave them? How does that make them actually want to make these changes if They were basically forced into making them. When you have a bunch of people on the internet telling you you're a terrible person, you need to lose your job, you need to lose your house, you need to lose everything because you said this wrong thing in the wrong way to me, it becomes a little policey, you know? It becomes a little surveillance-y, and that's the point I wanted to make. I feel like we're turning into like a very hyper-vigilant, hyper-surveillance culture, especially online, because cameras are literally everywhere these days and filming in public is just so normalized. You especially have to be careful because you might think you're just chilling out somewhere and just, you know, having a private conversation with somebody, and now all of a sudden you're on TikTok because somebody was like, if your name is Laura and your man went on a boys trip and he has dark brown hair and glasses, he was cheating on you. It's like you can't just process. First of all, you just had your whole world rocked by a stranger who has never met you, never laid eyes on you a day in their life, and now all of a sudden you got the whole internet ready to come out with pitchforks to attack your cheating husband. Rightfully so, kind of, sort of, maybe. But is it rightfully so? Is it really rightfully so? Is the person that just put this family on blast in the right? Are they morally righteous? Because yeah, everybody would want to know if their man was cheating on them. I would want to know. But do I need everybody? Do I need Kaylee from Tulsa to know? Do I need somebody in Shanghai to know? Do I need somebody in Brazil? I don't need the whole world to know. I need me to know. And when we start doing these mass call outs, you can even enjoy a moment in peace in public because you might end up on TikTok and be the next viral moment just because you decided to wear a little eccentric outfit and now you're the butt of everybody else's joke. I think we're going a little too far these days.
How do you feel about us living in a surveillance culture that has now led to public shaming online? So, for example, you ever see those stories where it'll be like, if your name is Laura and your man was on a girl's trip, I just seen him with a big booty stripper. What is it? Like, now the whole world knows along with you. Oh no.
Surveillance, yes, yes. Living under constant surveillance. I hate it, right? Because there is no privacy, there is no confidentiality. And whenever you tell people, they're like, oh, do you accept, are you condoning cheating? I'm like, no, but we also cannot do that, right? Somebody will be at the gym working out and somebody will pull out their video on them. Like, people do not have privacy. I don't think that is such a good behavior for us to do. The fact that you have a phone doesn't mean that you have consent to record everyone. You have consent to put everybody's name out there. You have consent to do this. But to me, that is not a good behavior. And also that is not an indication of somebody who understands healthy boundaries with people. Why are you in somebody else's business when it has nothing to do with you? That thing is so unhealthy. And again, it goes back to, we all want this sort of fame and viral moment, right? So everyone is chasing it, and so people are trying to do whatever they can to get that viral moment, forgetting that the people at the other end of it, they are humans. It's going to have impact on them. That we all have a right to confidentiality. We all have a right to privacy. Even in a relationship, you have a right to privacy, and it's important. We consent, right? If you're going to take a picture of somebody or take a video of somebody, maybe ask them for consent.
Exactly.
Can I take a video of you? And let's see what that person tells you. What are you going to take the video of? Now you're going to have a conversation with that person. And I've seen in situations where people are even doing it hiding. They are hiding the camera and they are doing it because they know that it is wrong. They are not supposed to do it, but they are doing it.
But let's talk about bandwagons. Last week on the show, we were talking all about fallacies and the different types of arguments, one of them being the bandwagon effect. Because all of these people said it's a good idea, you should just hop on and join too. Don't think critically about it, don't think about it, everybody else is doing it, so that must be the right answer. Oftentimes when I make these episodes, somehow something will pop up on my TikTok page that correlates to whatever episode we're talking about, and this video from a creator called Gadasulo? I don't know, but we're gonna insert a clip here.
The first maybe we were wrong about Be Better video that I saw a couple of days ago was one where the person making the video said something along the lines of, when I initially saw his commentary, I completely agreed with him, But when I saw the backlash, I kind of backed down and changed my opinion. And it really do be like that sometimes. I think we've made enough memes about the strangeness of cancellations on this app to begin to have an actual conversation about what it means to actually cancel someone on this app. Because the standards we act out in the real world do not seem to be the same standards we hold people to on this app, and I do not understand why. Now, I suppose a simple answer is that the people you see on this app are not your friends, so you don't exactly treat them as you would your friends, because I'm fairly certain that if you had a friend who made a mistake, you do not automatically cut them off and dismiss every single experience you've ever had together. But also, I suppose it depends on the gravitas of the mistake. If it is a morally reprehensible action versus a lapse in judgment, maybe a different approach is warranted. But then that calls to question, do most of the people who get cancelled on here get cancelled for morally reprehensible behavior or for lapse of judgment?
He brings up a great point about how people will watch a video and they'll agree with what the creator said, but then they'll see that the entire internet is canceling or dragging this person for whatever reason, and then they say, oh, I can't publicly say I agree with this person, I'm just going to join in because that's easier. And that's the problem with bandwagoning. And that's how it ties into the whole McCarthyism thing, because it's like you want to agree with this person and maybe you fundamentally do agree with them, but because the bandwagon is telling you, no, this is problematic, don't say that, don't agree with them, they're canceled, you feel like you don't want to be the outsider, you don't want to be the black sheep that could actually help that person and agree with them. You gotta go along with the others because you don't want to be the next victim of cancel culture. This type of groupthink is going to ruin us, because if we're discouraging people from having their own thoughts that may deviate from what the masses are saying, how are we supposed to introduce new thoughts and ideas into this world? How are we able to truly be individuals in a world that wants you to conform to everything? On an app where there's a new core every day, fairy core, cottage core, whatever core, in a world where people are selling you trends and telling you you need this lip gloss, you need this jacket, you need to look like the rest of us because this is what's in. And trends change so often, so you would think that, you know, individuality would be celebrated, and for the most part it is. Until somebody offers a new perspective we haven't heard, that's when things get a little shaky. Because there's only two ways you can respond to something that you've never heard of before. The first way is to come at it from an angle of curiosity, to ask questions, to engage in good faith with the person. The second way is to crap on it, is to talk about how stupid it is and why would you even say something like that. And everybody else join me in saying this because I don't want to be alone. Those are the two responses. So if you ever catch yourself being introduced to a new idea you haven't heard before, catch yourself. Is your first instinct, is your first gut reaction to talk about how stupid it is and list all the problems wrong with it? Or is your first instinct to come at it from an angle of curiosity? Again, I'm not saying everything is perfect. When things are flat out wrong, yes, you don't have to be curious about something that's objectively wrong. But if it's just something that is outside of your realm of comfort and kind of makes your cognitive dissonance act up a little bit, that is the perfect time to open your ears and listen, because that is the perfect way for change to start. When you feel those feelings in your tummy, when you're listening to something and you're like, ooh, this is new, this is kind of uncomfortable, my nervous system is kind of activated right now, that means that that's the perfect time for you to listen. Instead of coming guns a-blazing and just shooting down the person who has a new idea that you haven't heard of before, come at it from a place of curiosity. Let's talk about more parallels between evangelicalism and cancel culture, or the need for moral purity. The first way is that they both aim for purity. Evangelicals focus on a system of right and wrong. There's a clear set of guidelines, and if you stray from those guidelines, you're wrong. But if you stay in that box, then you're totally morally correct. Same with cancel culture. There's a set of arbitrary right and wrong, and your job is to uphold that. Your job is to be perfect in every area possible. And because there's this high sense of like moral superiority, that's when you feel like you can call people out, because I'm doing all of the work, I'm following all the rules to a T, so I have the agency to call you out. And I'm gonna gather my gang of friends to do it with me. On the same token, there's still that fear of being judged and being shunned for doing something wrong. Just like in evangelicalism, a lot of people who leave the church will say that they're so traumatized from it because they felt like they were never able to make a mistake. When you deviate slightly from what's right, everybody is quick to shame you for that. Same with cancel culture. When you're so scared of the whole internet coming at you and attacking you, you can start to develop this like moral OCD of making sure you cross your T's and dot your I's, never wanting to be the victim of of the next cancel. And similarly to somebody who's in a very religious space, you can develop that anxiety, that fear, and that's the thing. They want to keep you in this fear state so that you never want to step out of line. You may start to minimize yourself because you don't want to say the wrong thing by accident. Here's where evangelicalism and cancel culture differ. On the one hand, you have evangelicals who are so focused on repenting, forgiving, turn to God and everything will be okay for you. All of your mistakes will be erased if you just hand yourself over to Christ. We don't get that in cancel culture. We don't have that grace. We don't extend that grace and compassion to people. You make one strike and you're out of here, buddy. Because I remember that time in 2014 when you said X, Y, and Z. I don't care if you're 35 years old now. I don't care if you have a whole family. I don't care if you're not even making that type of content anymore. I still remember that one thing you said, and I'm never gonna let it go. And finally, this sense of moral hierarchy. There's this need to be so morally righteous and just correct all the time. A lot of the times in cancel culture, the whole idea is to make yourself be on the right side of history, and you have to let people know that you are on the right side. And it's not enough to just be on the right side. You have to publicize it. You have to shove it down people's throats. So who's able to be forgiven when you're canceled? Are you allowed to be forgiven, or do you just have to hold the title of problematic forever? That's what I wonder, because again, you have some things that are clearly, cancelable offenses, right? There's some things that's just like, yeah, no, this person, we don't need to hear from them ever again. They're gonna still have their fans. They're still gonna have their fan base that are watching them, supporting their videos and stuff. But for the most part, we don't want any part of that. What about the people like the Shaheems of the world who maybe just say something that during a heightened time where everybody's very emotional, you just happen to say the maybe right thing at the wrong time? What happens to them? Should they be shunned too just because a couple of people didn't agree with their opinions? Should they just never be heard from again? Should we just completely ignore them? And that's the disconnect with the cancel culture, because I think it started off as something that people were truly trying to just hold people accountable who had been skating by all these years, just saying whatever they wanted. I mean, 2014 and 2016 was a really heightened time. We had so much going on with the police. We had Black Lives Matter. So many different, just horrific things happening. And then of course 2 years later we get the orange person in office, where people felt like they were finally allowed to say what they've been holding in for so long. He is part of the reason why things are the way they are. I mean, let's just be honest. Nobody was really saying these types of things until he came on the scene. And that's not to say these people weren't thinking this the whole time. It's just they finally felt like they could come on camera, show their faces, and say these things. But in 2024, where so many of us have access to the internet and we're all getting out there using up our little airtime on the internet, myself included, I mean, how do you truly tell who needs to be canceled and who doesn't? Can these cancelings ever get biased? What if you already didn't really particularly like somebody on the internet, or you didn't really have a reason to not like them, but there was just something about them you didn't like? And so when you see an opportunity come up because that person is in the hot seat, now you have the I always knew there was something weird about them. How do we feel about that? Because it's like, if you knew there was something weird about them, why didn't you say anything before? Did you have to wait for your fellow bandwagon members to join you and say something first? And this is genuinely an open discussion, because it's so hard to actually give like a definitive answer of what happens. Because let's be real, even if somebody gets canceled, you can't really cancel somebody, because they're still gonna make their music, they're still gonna make their movies and stuff. Somebody is still gonna be a fan of them. So it begs the question, what is the line between simple accountability and mob mentality, just following along for the sake of? And this is another thing I want to bring up that I've noticed, especially in liberal slash leftist slash progressive spaces. I've noticed that we, and I say we because I'm a leftist, I consider myself a leftist, we tend to like run with these labels, and like when I say run, like a full football field's length run, okay? I've noticed, okay, and again, this is not always, but sometimes people on this side of things will see somebody say something maybe slightly less than savory, and they're quick to label that person. You're racist, you're a homophobe, you're this, you're that, that person's this, why are we even listening to them, they're weird, they said this. But when you ask them, what did this person say, what did this person do? Well, I heard from another TikTok comment from a stitch from somebody that they said something that was like this, so it kind of sounded like they were being a little homophobic, but I don't really remember, because you see what we're doing here, you see how we're so quick to like jump on something, but then you can't even like put in plain words what they did. The telephone games actually have to stop, like why can't somebody just be a bad person or just say something bad? Why do they have to now have the label to justify and legitimize why you don't like this person? It's not enough to just be a jerk. It's not enough to just be an asshole. They gotta be X, Y, and Z label on top of that too. And that's why bandwagoning is not always a great thing, because if you're just following behind what somebody else said in a comment of a stitch of a comment of somebody's stitches, you don't even know what you're talking about. You just heard somebody say it and you're like, oh, an opportunity to not like somebody, I'll join in too. That's not good. It gives McCarthyism, it gives Salem witch trials. That's why it's super important to not just follow along with what the crowd is saying. Do your own research and then come to your own conclusion. We have to get out of this black and white thinking. This person's 1,000% amazing, can never do wrong, sweet little cinnamon roll baby angel, versus they're the worst, most bigoted, terrible person ever. Hey, we need some nuance, okay? Good people can say fucked up things all the time. Bad people can make really great points. We have to add more nuance, okay? That's why I don't even like to say like, oh, I'm such a nice person, I'm so nice, I'm so good. Like, I feel like I don't need to label myself as that. I can just show you my character through my actions, because hey, maybe I'm PMSing and I don't want to be nice today. And be careful if you keep pointing your fingers at everybody else and calling everybody else a bad guy and keeping tabs on everybody else waiting for them to mess up, because a lot of the times that's projection. Oh yeah, you can point fingers at everybody else, but I don't know if you can do the same to yourself. Can you look at yourself in the mirror and point out all of your flaws? Do you think of yourself as 100% bad or 100% good? So why are we holding other people to that standard? And it's like, we do this on the internet, but we do not behave this way in real life. Do you hold your family and your friends to this standard that you hold people on the internet? Why is it that we have more expectations of people we don't know online? But in real life, I know you heard your friends say some messed up things. Have you checked them? Have you canceled them? When they say something rude, when your group chat is passing around people's pictures, I hope nobody's doing that on here. But when your friend says something out of line, when your mom says something out of line, are you checking them? Are you checking your racist uncles? Because I don't know. Based on the election results, it's not giving, but you have to get comfortable with disagreeing with people diplomatically. Everything doesn't need a hate train. Everything doesn't need a cancellation. Everything doesn't need a 10-part series as to why this person is terrible. Like, sometimes you're just not going to agree with somebody, or sometimes your personality just doesn't gel with them, and that's okay. But we don't have to like put people on the chopping block and just cancel everything out. 40 days and 40 nights of a hate train, and for what? And it's like, we have to think of that person's mental health on the receiving end of these hate trains. It can't feel good. If you had the whole internet turning on you for something that was just not problematic, but just not the popular thought at the time, how would that make you feel?
I think the person being cancelled, it can make them learn and it can make them regret. It's both end, I think, in that aspect, right? It can cause also the resentment and the other emotional depression, anxiety, all of that. And for some people, they can change their behavior, but I don't even believe it will be an actual change versus a performance. Okay, you want me to be this way, so I'm going to be this way for you on social media, but not like an actual internal change that is happening.
I think we don't know how to talk to people online, because we think that just because they're little pixels or they're a little 9x3 little face on our screens, we can just say anything and there's no repercussions. But that person is really gonna feel that. I know people like to act all big and bad and like, oh, I don't care, hate comments don't bother me. But if you have got like 100,000 people talking, stitching you and telling you how dumb you are, that is going to hurt your feelings. And I just think that some things are not worth it. Some new thought being thrown into the discourse that people may not be ready to hear and digest yet, so they just turn to attacking and name calling and the dogpiling. I've seen it, and I've seen people who genuinely make great content, and I'm gonna keep bringing up Shaheem. That's the one example I can think of just people being flat out disgusting and nasty, and it's really not worth it because they don't even do anything for real that warrants that type of reaction. It's just, I don't know, people don't know how to like sit with not agreeing with something. They have to like go into attack mode. Like, sometimes you can just curse them out under your breath and scroll to the next video. That's what I do. Like, if somebody says something stupid that I don't like, which happens a lot on TikTok, especially these days, I just call them stupid poopy heads. in my head or out loud, but with nobody around me, and then I just scroll to the next video. That's it. That's all you gotta do. Like, bring back healthy coping mechanisms. We don't need to do these 95-day hate trains. We don't need to do all these 10-part series and have the whole internet gang up on somebody. Let's just learn how to agree to disagree and disagree to agree. Now let's touch on the surveillance culture thing again, because I think we really are getting out of control. Even if you're filming a cute moment, you'll see a cute older couple holding hands or something, sharing an ice cream. And yes, the moment is cute, but why do we all need to see it? Why can't you just take that moment and just be like, okay, very cute, and move on? You see somebody wearing a crazy hat with blue hair and green clown shoes, take in the moment and just move on with your life. Why does it move you so badly that you have to whip your phone out, record a stranger you've never spoken to, and then upload it? And now you're having all of this conversation about them, but you never said one single word to them. Don't you think that's a little weird? And that's why we have to, as Alice would say, touch grass, because we're getting too comfortable. And I think that was because of COVID. We just got so used to talking to each other online, only seeing each other as little pixels and little 2D characters on our cameras, that we forget that just because it's online, these people really truly exist, and they truly really have to sit with all of this hate that they're getting for something that's not even that serious. That really affects people. It can affect your self-esteem and your mental health. And also, just because somebody's getting dragged doesn't mean that they're wrong. That's another thing we gotta understand. Like, just because you got the whole internet, guns ablaze and coming after you, doesn't mean you were necessarily wrong. Maybe they just weren't ready to hear it yet. Or maybe they just see somebody else getting dragged. They just want a little dopamine hit for the day because they hate their job, they hate their life, they don't get any attention at home. So it's a lot more fun to type some hate comments online just to get that little rush of dopamine, get that little rush of attention when the creator responds back to them. And now they have a back and forth exchange. And the cancel culture thing also turns people into one-dimensional characters. They say one unsavory thing, and now that's their whole personality. Every other good thing they've ever done in their life gets completely overshadowed by this one thing. And I honestly don't think that's fair. If you have a whole laundry list of all of the good that they've done, and you just have like maybe one or two things that you don't necessarily agree with, I don't think it's fair to then label that person as a bad person intrinsically. Just like, hey, doing good things doesn't mean that they're necessarily a good person. All good people that are, showing how good they are aren't good people. Just because you're giving out money to a homeless person and recording yourself doing it doesn't make you a good person. You know how many billionaires will donate to charities because, oh, it's such a good thing to do, but they're the most worst, insufferable people ever? Nuance. We got to normalize nuance. And I will shout out from the rooftops on this podcast forever and ever and ever, because it's getting scary the way we're getting into this like anti-intellectual, I can't think for myself, I saw everybody else dragging them, so I'm just gonna join in too. I'm not gonna fact check. I'm not gonna see what they actually said from their mouth. I'm just gonna take this little 10-second clip from 2-hour live from this person and just make my judgment. And I think that that's insidious and scary.
How do you think we can hold people accountable in a responsible way? And should everyday people even be entitled to holding others accountable?
It always goes back to community. Community is very, very important, right? It goes back to us nurturing and building communities with each other. That's how we are going to hold each other accountable in an effective way. And it also goes back to, this may sound as a cliche, but it also goes back to our own self-work as well. Because if I am able to, one, know who I am, two, know that I am human, I am fallible, I make mistakes, what a person says isn't entirely about my life, I can approach things with curiosity, and all of these things, it can really, really help. So building community and doing the self-work as well. And the other thing is who should or who is responsible. I always say this, it is the person who has been harmed, if there is harm caused, who gets to dictate how the sort of holding accountable to go. They don't necessarily have to be the person to hold the person or sit with them and talk to them, but they get to dictate that, hey, at this moment I am going to check out. So maybe, Alice, can you talk to this person for me? Can you listen to what they have to say? I want to hear them, but I'm also not emotionally, I don't want to be in the same space with them, right? And so can somebody do it for me? So for me, it's always the person that has been harmed or the group that has been harmed. So let's say an incident happens on social media and it's, let's say, Black women that have been harmed, or what was said was against Black women. I truly do believe it is Black women who have to lead how that accountability is going to look like. It doesn't mean they have to do it, but it also means that we listen to Black women say, hey, this person actually hurts my community, and this is how we want to be approached, or this is how we want to go about it. Because I often see people say things, and then when people apologize, the people that it has nothing to do about them, they are in the comment section like, I accept your apology. No, you don't. Yeah. What are you accepting apology for? It had nothing to do.
Literally, I see it all the time. I'm like, wait a minute, what?
It wasn't, the apology wasn't even yours to accept. And here you are being so quick. Oh, I accept your apology. Peace and light.
They could never make me hate you, queen. Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
Right. So I think we also have to think about that, and we are not the main character in every story, right? Sometimes we have to sit back and be like, okay, this person said something about Black people. I am not Black. So whatever apology you have, go figure it out with Black people. If they accept your apology, fine. If they don't, that is also fine. Because I also see people be like, oh, why can't you just accept the apology and just move on? They've apologized. What is there to do? You don't get to tell somebody that has been harmed or somebody who feels hurt how they should go about their emotional, how they should go about approaching the situation. So that is what I would say in essence to who gets to do the holding people accountable, how do we do it, and all of the nuance in that.
So to wrap up, I think that we have to give each other grace, and we have to understand that we're not always going to see eye to eye, we're not always going to agree, and we should give people the space to grow and learn from their mistakes. Now, it can be hard because I know for me, there will be people that I remember saying things from back in the day that I definitely don't agree with, and maybe they've changed now, but I'm still like, I remember that. I remember what you said. But it's like, why do we hold people to these impossible standards that we don't even know? Like, this one little moment is overshadowing all of the good they've ever done. And hey, it's up to you. Like, you don't have to like somebody that you don't agree with. You don't have to continue to watch somebody and support them if you don't want to. But at the same time, if you're not going to support them and you don't want anything to do with them, don't make your whole page about them. Don't talk about them all the time. Don't send them hate. Just leave them over here. You do your own thing, and that's it. Because that's where I think people get messed up. They say, oh, I don't care about this person's problematic, but you're going on their page, you're spamming their comments, you're watching their videos. It's giving fan behavior. So in these trying times, as information, misinformation, opinions are about to be spread all over the place, take care of yourself and take care of your mental health. And before you jump on that hate train, ask yourself, one, do I actually really care about this? Like, does this truly make a difference in my life? Or am I just joining along because I'm bored? And it's okay to be bored, but you just gotta be honest, you know? I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode, and I just want to thank Alice once again. Thank you so much for being a guest on the show today. Such great insight, such a great conversation. What do you guys think? Do you think that once you're canceled, you should stay on the chopping block forever? No chance of redemption? You can't go back? You gotta just hold this L forever and ever and ever? Or do you think that people can change? Let me know what you think. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and of course, download the episode on Spotify and Apple so you can listen at work and listen to me yap in your ear while your boss is yapping in your ear. All right, I'll see you guys next week. Bye.